And my name is Tom, Principal Planner with Grand River Transit. Joining me are our project consultants with Dillon Consulting, who will be presenting today. I'll pass it off to their team so they can introduce themselves. Then Dillon will go over the agenda and carry on with the presentation. Zara, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Tom. Good evening and welcome to everyone joining us. We really appreciate your time, so thank you so much for being here with us. With me tonight, my name is Zara Jaffer. I'm a planner and engagement specialist with Dillon Consulting. We're the firm that has been retained by Grand River Transit to support the development of the township transit strategy. And with us tonight is also Dennis Carr, who is a partner and transit planning lead with Dillon, and he's also the consulting project manager for this project. So you'll be hearing from Dennis a little bit more as we get into the presentation. But just to give you a little bit of an overview of how the session is going to be coordinated this evening, following the introductions, we're going to have a presentation from Dennis on the project overview and the township transit services. And then we'll have some polling and some questions to you here in our audience on your thoughts on how transit service is designed in Wilmot. Dennis will then share an overview of the service delivery options, and we'll have a discussion on those options and what you prefer, or what other kinds of additional elements or design components that you think would be meaningful or important to have as part of what you're seeing. We'll then share a little bit more on next steps for the project, and we'll have some time for questions and answers as well towards the end of the session. So as Tom mentioned, we do have some interactive elements. You will have the ability to either use the Q&A box to send in your questions or comments by text, or if you prefer to do it live, then we'll be able to have you unmute as part of the Q&A portion and the discussion elements of the session. So I am now going to hand over to Dennis to walk us through a presentation, and then we're going to do a little bit more on the interactive side. So Dennis, over to you.
Okay, thanks very much, Zara. I really appreciate the introduction. So if you can move over to the next slide, we're going to start with a bit of a project overview and what we're trying to achieve. And that starts with our project vision. And our vision is to expand and enhance existing township transit service to effectively and efficiently meet the mobility needs of Waterloo Region's township residents. So what does that mean and how do we achieve that? If you go to the next slide, that starts with our project goals. So the steps that we're going to take to really try to realize that vision is first, we're going to establish where is the highest demand for public transit service? Where does that exist? Is it along that existing corridor where Route 77 currently operates? What are the other travel patterns? How have they changed over time? And not just for inter-community service, but also local service within the township. Then we want to understand the potential benefits of transit service and how that transit service will benefit the residents. And by understanding those benefits, we can help shape and design a service that meets your needs. We'll then take that information and design a couple of transit service options for each township and select based on feedback, and then develop an implementation plan moving forward. So those are the steps and the technical pieces that we're undertaking to achieve this overall project vision. Next slide, Zara. So in terms of an overall timeline, we've already started on this project, conducting some background review and developed a number of preliminary concept designs that we will share with you tonight, and they're also available on the project website. We're here today in our first round of engagement, which involves both this public open house, but we also have an online community survey in place, which we encourage each of you to fill out. And that community survey will help us understand your existing travel patterns, what your preferences are for a potential transit service, and just sort of providing us that necessary input needed to identify what transit should look like, or an enhanced transit service should look like in Wilmot. From there, we're going to take that feedback that we received and refine a preferred service design and develop a plan. With that plan in place, or that draft plan in place, we'll come back to you and for a second round of engagement and get your feedback. And taking that feedback, we'll finalize the service design and provide some recommendations to regional council. Next slide, Zara. So that's the overall process that we're following and the objectives. So now let's move to some sort of concepts of what transit looks like in townships. So again, first of all, I always like to start off these presentations about why is transit important and why do we need transit? And traditionally, we've always thought of transit as sort of being important in more of the urban areas within municipalities, the larger, more densely populated municipalities. But we're seeing more and more of that expanding need for transit and expanded transit into the townships. And what does transit do? With rising cost of living and affordable health concerns, it provides that sort of affordable mobility option for individuals in the municipality. It provides access to hospitals and medical appointments, particularly for an aging population, but also for everybody, for employment, training, education. Provides that ability to move from a 3-car household to a 2-car, from a 2-car to 1-car, or from 1-car to no-car household. That option becomes available with transit service in place. It provides options to participate in recreation activities and points of interest within your township. It addresses those greater concerns over sustainability and protecting the natural environment, and also accommodating the increase in people who are choosing not to own an automobile. And finally, it has that ability to address increased traffic congestion that we're seeing in many of our roadways. Next slide, please. But there is also challenges in implementing transit, particularly in sort of lower density and large township areas. And that's really because the environment that we're operating in is much larger, more dispersed, in lower density, and in many cases having limited access to pedestrian infrastructure to access stops. And you've got many services and amenities that are dispersed throughout the township and in many cases outside of the township. And that makes it a little bit more difficult to put in a transit service model that works effectively and meets the needs of all individuals. And that's why when we're presenting options for you today, we're recognizing the needs, we're recognizing the challenges, and we've identified a couple of different service options or service models that are better suited for the operating environment or the land use that we're proposing. Next slide. So Wilmot has an existing service in place, and I see through the results of the poll that the majority of you that are participating here today have used the service, which is great. So we have that existing Wilmot Flex Route service that's in place that provides a connection into the Boardwalk Station with connections to New Hamburg and Baden. So that's what's in place today. Next slide. Now, as we're going over what are some of the opportunities to enhance transit in Wilmot Township, the first thing we look at is what are the service area options and how do we design the service? So there's various different options that we can look at. We can look at a township-wide service. And this is something that provides the ability to connect to any part of the township, from some of the more rural areas of the township to some of the more urbanized areas of the township. And that's where we sort of spread out our resource. The second is to provide a local circulator. So as an example, this could be just a smaller township service within New Hamburg, just connecting within that urbanized area of the municipality. And the third option is to look at an urban connector. So connecting some of the more urban areas into the urban municipality of Kitchener, Waterloo, and Cambridge. And that's currently what we see with Route 77. So lots of different options in terms of where we put transit service within the township. Go to the next slide. Then we start to consider what are the types of transit service models or routing options that we can consider. And there's 3 models that we're considering: fixed route, on demand, and the existing flex route that's currently in place. So if you go to the next slide, fixed route is probably the most common type of transit service that you'll see, and you'll see this throughout the Grand River Transit Network. And these are more traditional bus services that have a fixed schedule and a fixed route that the vehicle operates on that one sort of pretty much all day during the service hours that are allotted to it. And these are best suited in areas where there's a consistent demand or consistent travel patterns, and in higher density areas, and not as well suited for very low density areas or where the travel demand is very dispersed. The next option that we're going to consider on the next slide is on-demand transit. Now, on-demand transit operates a little differently, and we have an example of this over in Breslau. And on-demand is a shared ride service that does not follow a fixed route or fixed schedule, but operates within a defined service area. So within that defined service area or zone, you're able to call in or use your smartphone to request a ride. Various different options of potential available rides will come, and you select the ride that will take you from your point of origin to either a destination within that on-demand zone or to a connection to a fixed route service that where you can continue your trip to another part of the region. So again, operates similar as standard operating hours as a fixed route service was. The only difference is you need to request that ride, and the routing is dynamic, so it doesn't always follow the same route. And these type of services are best suited for areas where there's more dispersed demand or lower demand as well. Next slide. So this is just an example of how an on-demand service would work. Once again, you would start by booking your trip and identifying through the smartphone app or calling in what your desired pickup time is within the hours of operation, where you're located and where you want to go. It would identify the availability for you to get picked up. Now, as you're getting picked up and you're riding the route, that vehicle may pick up or drop off passengers along the way, but the route would be dynamic and take you along the shortest possible path, depending on who you're sharing that vehicle with. You would then get dropped off either at your destination or to a transfer point where you can continue your trip on a fixed route service. So that's how on-demand works. And finally, on the next slide, we have flex route. And again, this is similar to this is the same type of service that we see with the Route 77 in Wilmot, where it operates, it's kind of a hybrid between on-demand and fixed route, where it operates on a fixed route and a fixed schedule for the majority of the route, but it has the ability to flex off the route to accommodate some closer pickup or drop-off points within pre-designated areas based upon passenger request. So if that's a request that you want to get a little bit closer to your destination, you identify to GRT that you want that flex route, and if the vehicle is able to, depending on how many flex options are identified, it will deviate off route. So once again, these are the three options that we considered as we're going through. Next slide, Zara. The other thing to consider quickly, and I'll just go through this quickly, is when we're doing transit planning, it's all about trade-offs, right? And if you can imagine you have a single resource, and let's say that resource is a vehicle or a driver, and you're deciding, how do I best spend that resource? You know, we can look at geographic and where do we put that resource? We can focus it on a settlement area or one of the more urban areas, meaning that resource is more available in that area to be more frequent. Or we can say, no, we want that resource to be spread across the entire township and focus in on the rural areas. But that means that same resource may be less available because it's being spread out geographically. If you go to the next slide, we can talk about other trade-offs. We can look at focusing on trips locally within the township or focusing on intercommunity trips. When you go to the next bullet, we can focus on, you know, do we spend that resource extending hours, maybe taking it later into the evenings or the weekends, or maintaining the same hours and adding frequency and making that vehicle more frequent. And finally, we can look at maintaining low fares or adding fares, but increasing the level of service. So these are all trade-offs that we always think about when we're doing transit planning. And a lot of what we're discussing here today is helping us better understand where your priorities are and what works best for you. So here within Route 77, we're proposing some potential modifications to the overall routing. And we wanted to get your sense of, you know, which of these routing options works best for you and get a sense of if you have any questions, if there's about any of these options that we're going to present to you. So we're going to start first by, I'll go through a brief explanation about each of the options. And again, starting in New Hamburg, and then we'll look at other parts of Wilmot. We'll open it up to a few questions. If you have any questions of clarification about what we presented or any thoughts and comments, and then Zara will take us through another poll to try to get a sense of which of the options are preferred. So in the first option, it's more of a status quo type option in terms of the overall routing of the option. So this is maintaining that existing flex route that's in place. So once again, with that flex route, you have a core part of that route that operates along the majority of the corridor, and customers have the ability to request that the route flex off that route and go to other parts within New Hamburg. And the reason why we do these flexes is because we want to make sure that we provide access to some of these areas to reduce walking distance, but we don't feel that those routes need to go there on every single trip. So it just helps to improve the overall effectiveness of the route and reduce travel time if you're not flexing to those areas when no one is actually requesting a pickup or a drop off. So that's option one. And of course, one of the challenges with this is you have to request that route. And secondly, you're not guaranteed that flex. So if two other people requested a flex route on two other parts in New Hamburg, and you're requesting a third part, the vehicle may not have time to accommodate all of the flex options. Option two is more of a branch service. So branches are basically where we continue to have the fixed route service that runs every half hour along the main corridor, but every other bus will branch off to a different part of New Hamburg. So bus number one let's say it runs at 8 o'clock, may branch off north of Waterloo Street and south of the No Frills. And then at the next time the bus comes around at 8:30, it may branch off towards the sports complex, east of Peel Street. So it does those branches consistently. So always on the hour, it does one branch, and on the half hour, it does another branch. So the benefit of this service option is you have that consistency. You don't need to request that, but it's always branching at those specified times. So you might lose some frequency on some of those branches. The third option is to centralize the route and to keep it focused on the main corridor and create an on-demand zone within New Hamburg. And what this on-demand zone will do is if you're living outside of that main corridor, outside of that walking distance access, and you want to connect to that corridor, you can request an on-demand ride that will take you either anywhere within New Hamburg or to a link to Route 77 where you can complete your trip to the region, to the boardwalk terminal. So those are the three options that we've been looking at. I'm going to pause for a second and see if there are any questions of clarification that we can answer for those three options and get your thoughts. So Zara, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great, thank you, Dennis. So we do have a question here. Can Hink Street and Forest become a regular part of the route while leaving the rest of the flex stops? And before you answer, I just want to point out to the audience, if you do prefer to raise your hand and be unmuted so that you can ask your question live, just please feel free to do that. We'll have an opportunity for you to ask questions live as well if that's more comfortable, or to share any comments or anything like that live as well. So please feel free to go ahead and raise your hand if that's your preferred way of participating. And Dennis, we'll go back to you.
Sure, and it's certainly something that we can start looking at, right? And so one of the things that we'll look at is what is the ridership by trip, and is there enough ridership to justify that route making that deviation on every single trip? So certainly something that we can look at as we're going through this process. And again, Tom, feel free to add in if there's anything else you want to say from the region's perspective.
Yeah, so right now, all feedback is welcome. It is something that we can take a look into, adding the Hinks Forest area into the regular routing. But at this time, I can't comment on if we can or won't be able to, but all feedback is welcome.
Okay, thank you. We also have another question. Will there be more buses, that is more drivers, put on the route if any of these get put into effect? Tom, if you wanted to share some insights there.
I think we would have to take a look into what options will be preferred. Obviously, with an expanded zone, we would have to increase the vehicles into these areas, particularly with the option 3 having a flexed on-demand zone. It would warrant another vehicle in that area to help with the main trunk route of 77.
Great, thanks, Tom. Dennis, anything to add there?
No, it's certainly something that we look at, right? And a lot of it, we're going to rely on some of the results of the community feedback that we receive through this session, through the online survey, and again, looking at that growth in demand, growth in population that may be occurring, and how that all contributes to potentially adding more vehicles. So that's something that we certainly consider as we go through this process.
Okay, great. Okay, we do have another question from Councillor Dunstall. It has been a long time since I've used transit in KW. What are the hours of transit in the urban areas?
So I can answer that one. Our earliest would be just before 5 a.m. It's not, that'd be along the Ion route, and it would finish just shortly after midnight. But for the vast majority of urban routes, not the Ion or along the main corridor, typically between 5:45 in the morning till about midnight, maybe 12:30, depending on the route.
Okay. Thank you for those. I think that is all of the questions that we have so far. Does anyone else have a question or any comments or any kind of suggestions relating to the values that we talked about earlier, trade-offs or anything like that relating to the New Hamburg options? And I'll pop up a poll in a moment as well to get some more of your input on this. Please feel free to share in the Q&A or feel free to raise your hand if you prefer to do that.
I just wanted to add one more thing about the time of service for the urban areas. Now, those times would be along the main corridors. A little bit more of like the suburban neighborhoods might only have transit available from, let's say, 6 a.m. till about 10:30 p.m. So depending on the neighborhood that you're in, the more suburban ones would be a little bit less than the urban core.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so you're going to see a poll number 4 show up with service options for New Hamburg, asking which of the New Hamburg service options shown on the screen would you prefer to use? So option 1 is the maintaining of current flex stops. Option 2 is the branches off of Route 77. Option 3 is that New Hamburg on-demand zone. You could also tell us if you like both of them, you don't like either of them, or that the routes are not applicable. Okay, so I will end the poll in a couple of seconds here. I see a couple more answers are coming in, so we'll give folks a moment to respond. And if you are just joining us, we are going through the service options that are part of the Township Transit Strategy for Wilmot, and we'll be kind of talking through what the service delivery options are and getting your feedback on them as we move forward. Okay, so I'm going to end that poll and just share back the results. Certainly a mix of liking for option 1 and 2, as well as a kind of a desire to see some variety of options potentially. Okay, so Dennis, I'll hand it back to you to take us through the next one.
Sure. So we spent this first part talking about sort of potential enhancements, modifications to Route 77, but Wilmot is a very big township, right? And there's other potential demands and opportunities to serve residents within the township. So what you see on this map are when we're expanding into the more rural areas out of the township, the areas that are outside more of the urbanized parts. The part, the service model that works best is moving into an on-demand service, because simply if we design a fixed route, and try to orient that fixed route, it's very difficult to pick up as many passengers required within the rural areas to make that fixed route viable. So we move to a more flexible routing option where that vehicle is able to dynamically change based on passenger trip requests. So what you see here are two potential on-demand zones. The first one is Zone 2, which is located north of Highway 7 and 8. And that's if you sort of live outside of that reasonable walking distance of Route 77. And if you live or you're destined to or you work within this zone, you have that opportunity to either travel within the zone or travel to a transfer point. And that transfer point could potentially be a fixed route service in Wellesley, barring some of that feedback that we'll get from Wellesley residents. Or potentially, or the sort of one of the connection points on Route 77, which will take you to sort of that destination in New Hamburg and or Baden, and allow you to complete your trip into Waterloo at the Boardwalk Terminal to connect to the rest of the network. And then we have a zone number 3, which is South Wilmot, or which is south of New Hamburg and Baden, which is again that on-demand zone that connects to Route 77 or a destinations within that zone or destination within New Hamburg or Baden. So those are what's being proposed for more of the rural parts of the township if we're going to implement some sort of transit service. Before we move on, again, wanted to pause and get some sort of discussion going about, first of all, do you need any clarity on sort of what I sort of explained and sort of how these on-demand zones will work, and if you have any thoughts or feedback on how these on-demand zones. So I'll pause for a second and see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Dennis. So we do have a question which I think was also related to the previous set of options that you had shared. Would you consider changing the route to go down Herb Street instead of the current route? And I believe that is relating to the New Hamburg options.
Yeah. So once again, it's great feedback, and sort of any sort of route modifications that you're looking at, we'll certainly consider. Tom, I don't know if you have any other sort of thoughts on that, but certainly something to consider.
Yeah, I think it is something to consider. But yeah, all feedback we're all going to take into a consideration. Just kind of go from there. But there are options. I'm not sure where that resident resides or requesting transportation or transit. But some of that flex zoning on demand might be beneficial for those areas in St. Agatha if the request is to go down Herb.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. How long do you anticipate an on-demand pickup will take when you call it in?
So that, right now it's very early days. We'll need to sort of understand what the potential vehicle requirements are and what the potential demand will be, and how long it takes for that vehicle to go from one pickup drop-off point to the next. So typically, we would ask residents to call, within an hour of your desired pickup time, approximately. As sort of a rule, and we might alter that slightly as we get a little bit more information on what the demand looks like. But the more time you give, if you have sort of a priority trip that you need to make, and then sort of more notice you give within that day, the more likely you are to get the trip time or pickup time that you have requested, and the less notice that you give. If there's a lot of demand at that time and vehicles are tied up making other trips, again, it's a fairly big township, then you might have to wait 15 or 20 minutes, or you might not get the exact pickup time that you're looking for. But generally, the way on-demand works is sort of you're making those trip requests on the day that you want to travel. So you don't always have to travel or make those requests days before you need to travel.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the on-demand zones, are those zones referring to additional bus routes along Route 77, or are these basically talking about what's existing right now?
So those on-demand zones would be additional vehicles. So we would continue to maintain the vehicles that are on Route 77, and that would follow the exact route. So these are additional vehicles that would operate within those zones. And if someone wanted to connect to Route 77 to complete a trip and, let's say, provide a connection into the Boardwalk terminal, then that vehicle would connect you to a transfer point where you can then transfer and hop on Route 77 and complete your trip. So we would at least have one vehicle in Zone 2 and one vehicle in Zone
3. Okay, thank you. Hopefully that answers the question. If you have any follow-ups or any more details you'd like to hear about, please feel free to share. And once again, you can also raise your hand if you'd prefer to do it over the microphone. Okay, I will. There you go. You'll be allowed to unmute.
Hi there. Can
Hi.
you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. The thing is like Route 77 now, like they ride in only 5 days. Like, is it possible to get like 7 days? Because like on the Monday, if I have a morning shift, I cannot call for the, for my pickup or anything else. So is there any better solution for the Route 77?
Great question.
Certainly that's something that's being considered as part of this overall township strategy. So we're focused on what are the different routing options that we're going to consider. Is there the potential and is there enough demand to create some of these more rural on-demand zones that you're seeing here on this slide? But the other thing that we're going to start to look at is there that opportunity and demand to expand later into the evenings and onto the weekends? So we certainly want to hear that feedback. We want to hear what your priorities are through this engagement session, in which we sort of heard through the folks that are attending, and through the online community survey. We'll sort of take that feedback and identify, where we need to prioritize service enhancements.
Okay. Yeah.
So all of this feedback is great. Like, and if we hear that sort of consistent feedback, that provides a lot of good information for us.
Oh, okay. Because like my only concern about those, but otherwise the Zone 2 or Zone 3, I'm not bothered about those.
Yeah, so this would only be applicable to individuals that live in those areas or need to go to one of those areas.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
if you're living in, one of the more urban parts of the township,
yeah, I live in
This
Kitchener
group,
every day. I go for work like to New Hamburg to
okay,
McDonald's one. And
yeah,
every time I have to call for my pickup, and it's like from 9 to 5, and most of the time, you cannot call at 7 or 6, you know. So if
oh, I see.
and if
So,
I have to get a Monday ride at 7, then I cannot call anybody, you know.
okay,
And
so,
if I tell the people at Friday, most of the time they don't remember or they don't come. The service is really great, but like you should the flex stop should be like more, you know.
okay.
So every day we can get like the regular shift,
Mhm. So
and the
this is
time,
your,
yeah, the time should be extended, and the weekend service, because I know a lot of people that they want to travel but they don't have like the access to this GRT. That's why they book like ride share. Like hundreds of people they book ride share because we don't have access, you know, like frequent access.
okay,
So if the ride is frequent, I think there will be more customer, like more people like me who are like having problem on a Monday shift or weekend shift, or who like end at 7. Like most of the people 11 to 7 shift, they end up with 7, and there is no bus, you know.
yeah. So it sounds like to me that, I hear what you're saying, but one of the things that I've also heard is sort of extending the hours in which you can book a flex trip, right? So that
Yeah,
ability to book that flex trip.
yeah,
Zara, if it's okay, maybe
Yeah.
we just sort of go through some of the questions that relate to the on-demand piece in the rural areas, and then when we get to the Q&A section, we can get back to a lot of these questions, other questions on Route 77, et cetera. But this is all great feedback that we're hearing.
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Thank you so much, Shafat.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we do have, Dennis, as you mentioned, a few questions on access to the survey, as well as some more questions along the lines of weekend service for Route 77, and some of them are comments and some of them are questions. So we will hold those. Thank you so much for sharing them, and please continue to do that. And we'll come back to this shortly as soon as we finish the discussion on the service options. So Dennis, we'll go back to you to cover the questions or the service options for New Dundee.
Sure. So, just as a slight extension of what we are talking about with the on-demand zones, when we get into zone number 3, we have the community of New Dundee, which is located in the southeastern portion of the township. And one of the things we were looking at in terms of what are some potential options is when we look at these on-demand zones, do we want to continue to focus those on-demand connections to Route 77 in either Baden or New Hamburg to sort of complete that trip? So sort of covers that yellow area. Or if, as we get through our discussions with North Dumfries, is that desired demand, if you live in New Dundee, to go sort of east or south into either Ayr or a potential route from Ayr that we are going to be discussing at a later public open house, which would connect to either Cambridge or some of the southern parts of Kitchener instead of the boardwalk. So, when we sort of dissect that on southern on-demand zone, if you're living or working in New Dundee, do you have a preference for that sort of focus back into New Hamburg, Baden, or into North Dumfries, Cambridge, and South Kitchener? So again, before we go into a bit of polling, any questions on these two options if you sort of live, work, or travel to New Dundee, or just have a general thought about it regardless?
We have a comment that says, if you build it, then the demand will come. I mostly drive to Kitchener because there is no service after 7 p.m. and I typically work until 10 p.m. So certainly having the option to have the service would help kind of reveal the demand that is kind of latent or existing currently. Okay, I
Any other
see.
questions? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I see Shafat has his hand up as well, so I'm going to allow you to unmute there if you'd like to. You have a question about the routes that you're seeing for New Dundee?
Oh, I forgot to tell you, in one of the buses, like the AC is not working, and it's really hot, like in the summer. Sorry. Like,
No
sorry for
problem.
jumping.
No worries. Thank you for that. We'll certainly take that feedback and share it back with the team. Okay, I don't see any other specific questions on New Dundee. Does anyone else have any specific thoughts or questions? Otherwise, I'll pop up a poll here to get your feedback on this. Okay, so you'll see a poll pop up that says service options for New Dundee. Which of the service options shown on the screen do you prefer? Option 1, which is the South Wilmot on-demand zone. Option 2, which is the West North Dumfries on-demand zone. Do you like both of them? Don't like either of them? Or do the routes not really apply to you? Give folks a couple of moments more here to think about it. Okay. So it looks like for a number of our participants, both of the options look good, but these two also do not really apply to some of our participants, so that's okay. But hopefully that's helpful feedback for you, Dennis and Tom. Okay, so we're going to kind of move into a more general discussion and Q&A now. But before we do that, just to give you a little bit of a sense of the next steps, Dennis, you had shared the schedule earlier in the presentation. Do you want to just quickly talk through what our next steps are, and then we'll open up the floor for the discussion Q&A?
Yeah, sure. As I mentioned before, this is a bit of a repeat on our schedule that we had at the beginning of the presentation. So once again, right now, we're collecting a lot of feedback, and we have a survey open, and we really encourage you to go online, fill out that survey, share it with your friends and neighbors as well. The more feedback we get, the more engaged we get, the more information we have to sort of respond to some of the options that we put forward, both from a routing perspective, but also what your priorities are in terms of things like weekend evening service, reduced walking distance, better travel time, etc. So we'll be taking that feedback over the summer and once again, developing that preferred service design. And in the early fall, we'll be back out for engagement and once again, taking that feedback and finalizing design and presenting to the regional council in the late fall. So that's sort of our timeline and sort of where we're at with this township transit strategy.
Great, thank you, Dennis. Okay, so we did have a few comments kind of come through asking about weekend service on Route 77. So Dennis, maybe did you want to just talk a little bit about, that aspect of the service design and how we kind of provide for folks who want sort of off-peak hours service and on weekends?
Yeah, and as I mentioned before, like transit service planning, it's all about trade-offs, right? And so what we're looking at is we're trying to identify what that overall demand is and where we can most effectively utilize those resources to meet the needs of the community, right? So as we look at this and we start seeing, okay, so we think our priorities are on weekends or evenings, and we start to take that, to consideration, and maybe we prioritize that over some other service enhancement elsewhere. So these are one of the things that, as we keep hearing more of your feedback, as we start looking at the travel demand and what that sort of demand for weekend travel is, and how it's changed since that service was first implemented many years ago, those are all considerations we make when identifying what are some of the recommendations that we may make on how to enhance the service.
Okay. Councillor Dunstall, I see, has her hand up, so I'm going to provide that for her to unmute. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I unfortunately, I'm just going to reiterate what you have been saying. I have a lot of constituents who either work late into the evening or on weekends, or they have teens or young adults who don't have vehicles, who they have to go and pick up from their part-time jobs. So from my perspective and from the feedback that I've received from my constituents, that is the top priority, is the evening service as well as the weekend service. Thank you.
Perfect. I appreciate
Great, thank you very much. And certainly that reflects what we're hearing in the kind of the Q&A comments and the chats as well. Councillor Martin also noted it would be great to have more hours both during the week and on weekends. We also had another comment on wanting to have weekend buses on Route 77 to get to work. Otherwise, there would be a number of different transfers that would need to happen in order to get to destinations in Wilmot. So weekend service definitely does seem to be a high priority for the community. Are there any other design features, any other accessibility elements, or anything that you want to see considered as part of the transit strategy for Wilmot? We'll give you a couple of moments to think about it. Please feel free to share either in the chat or by raising your hand. And while you're thinking about that, I'm just going to share a few links in the chat here. So you will be able to take the survey that is currently live. We have an opportunity for you to share your feedback and to share that with others in your family or your friends who weren't able to be here this evening but would like to share their feedback. We're also going to be posting the recording of the session, so you'll be able to catch up there or share that with anyone that wasn't able to join us this evening. So I'll share first the link to the GRT business plan engagement page, which is how I'm sure many of you found the information for this evening session, but just for ease of reference, that's the link to the GRT business plan page, and you can subscribe on that page for updates on the project as we progress. I'm also going to, you can find the link on that page, but I'm also going to post the link directly here to the Township Transit Strategy Survey. So you can take that offline and fill it in at your own convenience. It will be open until August 2nd, so you have a few weeks to fill that in and share your feedback. And certainly we look forward to getting your feedback, appreciating that you were here with us this evening, but also any additional thoughts or any additional feedback that you'd like to share via the survey would be much appreciated. And we'll certainly be packaging all of the comments and all of the Q&A into an engagement summary as well that will be shared once the engagement for this first round is complete. So you'll be able to kind of catch up on anything that you might have missed once that is released as well. But yes, once again, we have a comment about, okay, a couple of comments on engagement. One was about the survey being made available in hard copy, and I might give this one to Tom just to confirm if it would be possible to have some hard copies of the survey available on the township buses to be able to, for customers to fill out in hard copy.
No, absolutely. I can ask our marketing team at GRT to see if that's an option that is available, that we can have something printed out and then sent along that way as well. So it's not just a digital. But I believe I'll ask our GRT marketing team to post something on the website with an update, with a possible link, so people can print it out as well. But I'll double check with our marketing team just to make sure that that is something that we can do.
Great, thank you. Another comment says, I heard about this through a bus driver. Why was this meeting not promoted better? Certainly great feedback. We'll definitely be taking that back and thinking about some more ways to make sure that notice is provided or that you're able to hear about this type of event. I believe it was shared on social media, on the website, and through the common channels for GRT, but we'll definitely try to make sure that there's wider coverage on these types of sessions in the future. Any other questions or comments? Feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to unmute, or feel free to share them in the chat. Councillor Martin, please go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you for doing the seminar this evening. So my name's Stephen Martin, Councillor Ward 4, Wilmot Township. I know at our Wilmot Township Council, we've talked about the hope that the increased hours will happen for the Route 77. I know it does raise the potential of raising taxes. But I'm hoping that our township council, as well as the Waterloo Regional Council, will look at increasing hours. And because I know there's so many people in Wilmot Township who are looking for more transit time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, and we're certainly looking forward to making sure that all of the feedback that we're hearing is brought forward in a way that is meaningful for council to be able to see and hear what residents' perceptions and desires are, and hopefully that kind of informs the decisions that will be made based on the recommendations on the strategy. We had a couple of comments. I do hope for the best of bus 77. So certainly that one is a key route for folks, and appreciating that the effort is important for the community to have an opportunity to share feedback and to hear about the strategy. So we'll look forward to seeing many of you and hopefully many more community members in round 2 of our engagement process. Perhaps while folks are thinking about any other questions they might have, we'll just quickly share that once again, the survey is still open until August 2nd. And the Engage Waterloo Region engagement page is really your best location for keeping up to date with the project and making sure you don't miss anything. So please do make sure you subscribe there.